It's pretty amazing how one single word can sometimes spark a massive debate, right? Well, today we're going to look at how one verse from the Bible did exactly that, and it created this huge fork in the road for Christian theology.
And it all boils down to this one central question. Was Jesus a created being? Now, you'd think the answer would be a simple yes or no, but as we're about to find out, it is, well, it's anything but.
So you got two major camps. Mainstream Christianity says, nope, absolutely not. Jesus wasn't created. But then Jehovah's Witnesses say, yes, he was. So how did two groups reading the very same book land on completely opposite answers? Let's dive in.
Okay, so first, let's unpack the Jehovah's Witness argument. Their entire case really hinges on one very specific phrase from the New Testament.
And here it is. This is the verse that kicks the whole thing off, Colossians 1:15. Now for Jehovah's Witnesses, when they read that phrase, firstborn of all creation, it seems pretty clear-cut. I mean, if he's the firstborn of creation, well, that must mean he's a part of creation, doesn't it?
So the key here is that the word firstborn is being interpreted in its most literal sense, first in the chronological lineup. So from this perspective, Jesus was the very first being God ever created, and then everything else followed. It's a really simple, direct reading of the text. But of course, there's another way to look at this.
All right, let's switch gears and look at the mainstream Christian perspective. And to do that, we actually have to go back, way back, to the Old Testament to find a clue about what this word firstborn could really mean. And this is where things get really interesting, because you have to ask the question, does firstborn always just mean the first one born? Or could there be another layer of meaning here, something deeper that we're not seeing at first glance? Okay, check this out. This is a verse from Psalm 89, and in it, God is talking about King David, and he calls him his firstborn. And here's the big twist, was David actually the firstborn son in his family?
No way. Not even close. In reality, David was the last-born son of his father Jesse. He was the youngest of 8 boys. So why on earth would God call the youngest son his firstborn? It just doesn't make sense, unless the word means something totally different than birth order.
So with that context, the word firstborn suddenly looks a lot less like a number in a sequence and a lot more like a title. It's about rank, about status, not chronology. It means preeminent, supreme, or holding the highest rank, which makes total sense because David was also called the most exalted of the kings. And all of this brings us right to the core of the disagreement. We're going to have to get a little nerdy here because it all boils down to the specific words used in the original Greek of the New Testament. See, the Apostle Paul, the guy who wrote Colossians, was writing in Greek. And he had a choice. There were different words he could have used, and the specific one he picked is absolutely critical to this entire debate. Okay, and here is the absolute kicker. The Greek word that Paul chose to use for firstborn was Prototokos, and that word carries the meaning of being preeminent or first in rank. Now get this. If he had wanted to say that Jesus was the first created thing, there was a perfectly good word for that. He could have used protoktistos, but he didn't. He chose Prototokos. And that single choice, well, it changes everything.
And that right there is the bedrock of the mainstream Christian argument. The whole idea is that Paul's word choice was deliberate. He picked Prototokos specifically to show that Jesus holds the highest rank over creation, not that he was the first piece of creation.
Okay, so let's pull back and put these two interpretations side by side to really see the difference. So, to break it all down, in the Jehovah's Witness view, firstborn means first in chronological order, making Jesus the first being God ever created. But in the mainstream Christian view, firstborn is all about rank and preeminence, making Jesus the eternal Son who is supreme over everything. It's honestly kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. Two totally different understandings of the nature of Jesus, and the entire disagreement hinges on how you interpret this one single powerful word. And really, that leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on, doesn't it? It just goes to show how incredibly important translation and context are. And it makes you wonder, what other huge, world-changing beliefs might also boil down to the meaning of just a single word?